Today we went on a field trip and went over to University of Tennessee to the something Natural History Museum.
McClung.
McClung. Is that right?
Yes.
I apologize wherever I just offended. All right. So, and went in and saw some of their exhibit stuff. Had a couple cool fossils and everything. But if you recall, if you weren't here last night, if you were here last night, I said if they have a human evolution section, what will they, without exception, I've yet to find one who didn't have this, what will they show regarding the skin color and human evolution?
From dark to light.
It always goes from dark to light. The darker your skin, the more different your features from your typical, stereotypical, light-skinned European person, the less evolved you are. That's been social Darwinism forever. Okay? Now, that's not what they publicly say, but that's what was taught for many years. Read Charles Darwin's Descent of Man, 1871. That's all he talks about. And then all the guys who came after him, like Herbert Spencer and Charles Davenport and Francis Galton, Darwin's half-cousin, I believe, or something like that, who coined the term eugenics. It's what they all believe, 100%, without exception. It's what they taught. Well, here's what they show at the museum. If you go down there, watch carefully. First, watch the eyes. This is the first thing they do. Go from black eyes to what? White eyes. Humans have white eyes. Gorillas and chimps have black eyes. And then keep watching what happens to the features of like the nose and the eyebrows and the skin color. Now this has been fast forwarded. It's about a 2-minute video. I've trimmed it down to 1 minute. I fast forwarded it. But as we keep going, we started with really, really, really dark, and now we're progressing through and going to more of a not as dark, and the hair is always inferred. It's totally made up. No, hair is never preserved with the fossils. Okay? So that's all been inferred to put on there. And keep watching. Okay, we gotta get a few features a little bit different, and we went from really, really, really dark skin to what? There it is every time. To this day, every time. And then it reverses it back. I think every human evolution display is the most racist thing we have in our museums today. It's just absolutely heartbreaking and sickening to me. But that's what evolutionism teaches. Now, we're going to go from creation. We covered all that last night. We're going to fast forward 1,656 years to a time of great judgment. We saw when dinosaurs were created, okay? What number day? Can anybody remember what number day in the first week of history were they created? What number day? 6. That's right, 6. Because dinosaurs are reptiles that walk how? Upright on their legs. Okay, for those of you who are new, okay, that's what makes a dinosaur a dinosaur. It's a reptile that walks upright on its legs. You see how he's walking upright on his leg? He's not doing like an alligator push-up position. He's walking upright on his legs. Okay, so question, as review, is Bunker the Tylosaurus here? Is he a dinosaur? No, he doesn't even have any legs. Okay, the Pteranodon doesn't have a name. It's so sad. I know, it's sad. The Pteranodon, is he a dinosaur? No, he doesn't have the hole in his hips. He doesn't spend his time walking around. He is a flying reptile, okay? But T-Rex, dinosaur? Yes. Absolutely. Okay, so Dromaeosaurus, dinosaur? Yes. Okay. And Montosaurus, dinosaur? Yes. The dinosaurs created what number day? 6. The water creatures and winged creatures, what number day? 5. So, worldview question, review. Which came first, according to God's word, the chicken or the dinosaur? Chicken. Exactly. Okay, so, 1,656 years later. When God made Adam and Eve, how did he make them? Perfect. Remember last night? Perfect. What were their mental capacities like?
Perfect.
Full, complete usage of their brains. Unlike anything we can fathom. Adam probably would have made Solomon look like he was in kindergarten. Okay? Just incredible. You know, in fact, what does God have him do on that first day of history? Before Eve shows up.
Name all the animals.
Name all the animals. Now, all the species we have today, No, just each according to their kind. And you just got the land kinds probably there, and some of the wing kinds. And so you just got, tyrannosaurs, done. Okay. Cats, done. Dogs, done. Elephant kind, done. Okay. Okay, so not going to take very long. He's probably done by lunch. And what did God show him through that? Why did God have him name the animals?
He's in charge of them.
There was nothing like him. Remember, God made the animals and said it was
Good.
which means it was
Perfect.
Is he ever going to make another animal again? No. And then he says, now let us make man as in. Man is not an animal. And that's what Adam sees when he names the animals. And then God says, now I will make for you the perfect helpmeet. He makes Eve. So as we go back closer to perfection, what would have been the intelligence level, do you think, of those people who lived during those times? Incredible. I mean, we can see civilizations after the flood, after Tower of Babel, and see how amazing they were, how advanced they were, building the pyramids, building the incredible structures we see in ancient China, the things we see down in South America, in Machu Picchu, and all over the world. It's incredible. Very, very advanced. The Bible says in Genesis chapter 6 that the people of that time used their incredible intelligence for what? Good or evil? Evil. In fact, it says these incredibly smart people devoted themselves, they got their brains so entrapped in wickedness that it says every thought of their heart was evil all the time, continuously. They weren't even capable, they got themselves to even having one good thought. We can't even begin to fathom that level of wickedness. It got so bad that God says, I'm just going to have to wash it all away and start over new. Is there anybody still faithful when he decides to do that?
Noah and his family.
There you go. A man named Noah. Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. And God says, hey, Noah, I got something for you to do. I need you to do something because there's a judgment coming. What's the judgment that's coming?
Flood.
What is it? A big flood, a colossal flood, a global flood. He makes this very clear. But Noah's going to have to build a what to survive?
A boat.
A boat. And it probably looked like this. No?
Not quite.
No, this was out of the Bible curriculum. Kid you not. What's wrong with that picture?
Everything.
That's right. No, unicorns. Where are they at? What else is wrong with it?
It's only 20 feet long.
It's teeny.
Pretty small. Yeah.
One of each kind.
Only one of each kind. Did you catch that?
Yeah.
What else is wrong with it?
One.
He's the only human.
They're outside. Yeah. Yeah. Where's Noah's family doing all the work down below? Yeah, I guess. And my favorite part is, what's Noah doing?
Waving at the camera.
Waving
And smiling.
and smiling. Hey, see you later. Not really, you know. This is, okay. Okay. Maybe, how about this one? Maybe this one's better. You like that? Well, we got some problems with that one too.
Yeah.
He's got his sunglasses. He's got a little, male pattern baldness there. But, he's got his lemonade though. He's doing good. Okay, how about this? Is this a little better?
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. The ark was humongous. It was huge. Okay, Matt, anybody been to the Ark Encounter? Okay, I recommend going just to get the scope of it based on the biblical dimensions. Okay, this thing was huge. It was, you have all the cubit numbers. You can break it down into our understanding of modern day measurements. About 450 feet long, based on 1 cubit size. The one down, over, and up, yeah. So to the Ark Encounter, they used the royal cubit of 510 feet long. You put this thing near the World Cup soccer field, it will dwarf it. This thing was huge. 3 floors. At just the 450 foot long, that's over 100,000 square feet of floor space. Okay, and its dimensions are just impressive because this thing is going to have to survive a what?
Flood.
A flood. A global type flood. This wasn't just some local rainstorm. This wasn't a local flooding thing. They had to be ready for it. And in fact, how long are they going to be ready for it? Anybody know how long they were in the ark, according to what the Bible tells us? Huh?
371.
371. Someone's got cheat notes over there. 371 days when you add it all up, okay? You can take it from when it says they entered in, okay? The 17th day of the second month, all the way to the 27th day of the second month, okay? And you add that all up, it's about 371 days. And God was very clear about this. Everything's going to die unless it's in the one place where you can be saved. And that was what?
In the ark.
In the ark, okay? All flesh, the end of it has come. He says in chapter 6, verse 70, all flesh in which the breath of life from under heaven, everything under the sky. Does that kind of cover everything? Yes, everything that is on the earth shall perish. He then said in chapter 7, the water prevailed more and more upon the earth so that all the high mountains everywhere, just in one area?
No.
No, where? Everywhere were under heaven. Under heaven, again, under the entire sky, were covered. The water prevailed 15 cubits higher, and the mountains were covered. All flesh that moved on the earth. In just one place?
No.
No, where? Everywhere perished. And he said again, then he blotted out every living thing that was upon the face of the land, from man to animals to creeping things, birds of the sky. They were blotted out, and only Noah was left, together with those that were with him in the ark. Peter in the New Testament said that he did not spare the ancient world, the entire ancient world, but preserved Noah, a preacher of righteousness, with how many others?
7.
Who were those other 7?
Wife.
Mrs. Noah, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, and their wives. Exactly. Okay? Now wait a minute. That means when they come off the ark, we're going to have 3 couples that will have children. We saw last night Dr. Nathaniel Jensen, Harvard PhD in cell biology, said about 4,300 years ago, according to mitochondrial DNA mutation rates, it shows us that we started 4,300 years ago with how many mothers?
3.
3 to get all of the people we have today. I wonder who those 3 were. Don't you love how science always confirms the biblical record? It's so good. And Jesus said, Luke chapter 17, they were eating, drinking, marrying, they were being given marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them. Just a few? Just in a certain area? All. The Bible is unanimous on this about what kind of event took place here with this flood. So, if anything's going to survive, they got to be on what?
The
ark.
The ark. How many doors were there?
1.
One door and only one, and yet its sides are 2. I'm on the inside, and which side are you? Jesus said in John chapter 10, I am the door. How many ways are there to be saved today?
1.
So, we got to get stuff on the ark. What else is on the ark? What else is on there? Animals. Exactly. Animals. God said you got to bring. He's going to bring these animals to him. How many?
2 of each.
2 of each kind, unless they were clean ones. And then we've got 7 pairs, give or take. Okay, on there. Or if they were birds, okay, the winged ones, there were 7 of them as well. Okay. So how many is that? Well, it depends on how many kinds there are of these land and flying things. Okay. So it's like, remember we talked about dogs last night. How many varieties of dogs are there? Name some for me. Name some.
Corky.
Collie, Poodle,
Rottweiler.
Wolf, Caution, what? Golden Retriever, good. German Shepherd, Beagle, there you go. Okay, but they're all still what?
Dog.
Dogs. Does Noah need every one of those varieties you said on the ark?
No.
No, he doesn't need all those. He just needs what?
2.
2 dogs, that's it. And from which you get all the other things. Anybody ever watched just because you accidentally turned to it, or maybe you are a fan of it. When they're in New York and they're showing their dogs and they're all running around doing their little thing, the dogs, okay. You ever see? Okay, listen next time. It's fascinating. They'll talk about the breed of the dog, and they'll talk about how old that breed is. Most of them are only 100, 200 years old. The oldest one I've ever heard, whenever I caught it, and I don't catch it very often ever, is like 500 years old, and that's it. So all the varieties we have today weren't around 500 years ago. But we have dogs, and we got 2 on the yard. So that greatly reduces the number we need to have on there. Trying to go for a minimum amount of animals, including those still counting 14, 7 pairs of all the clean ones and the birds, there at the Ark Encounter, they have 1,398 kinds for a total of 6,744 animals. They had a multi-year project of having biologists and zoologists and animalologists and everything else, okay, working on that, trying to figure out what is the minimum we have, but we can still get everything we have alive today and everything we don't still have alive today. And that's what they came up with. Another great researcher named John Woodmarath, he went for more of an, what's a maximum number we have to have. And still have enough food and supplies and water and waste removal and all that stuff. And he came up with 8,000 pairs, so 16,000 animals on the ark would still be no problem. Now, if we're talking about animals that were created and still maybe living around then, including some walking reptiles, what might else would that include? Oh, yeah. If they're alive at the time of the flood, then they would be on there as well. So how many are we talking about? Based on some great research by some geologists and paleontologists, they've come up with about 60 to 80 kinds of dinosaurs. Okay, kinds. Okay, so like you wouldn't need both T-Rex and Albertosaurus because they're both just Tyrannosaurs. You just need 2 Tyrannosaurs. That's it. Okay. They come up, so that would be around 120 to 160 dinosaurs. But how are you going to fit them on the ark?
Shrink wrap.
Aren't they ginormous? Shrink wrap. I have not heard that before. That's good. How would you fit them on the ark?
Very young of everything.
Oh. Not long ago, Mississippi, right? A new record alligator. How big was it? 18 feet long. Somewhere around there, 16, 18 feet long. Okay, huge. Okay. Every time you see one of those record-setting sized alligators, what's also usually record-setting about it?
It's age.
It's age. Because what do reptiles do their whole life?
Grow.
They keep growing. Okay? So, are you going to be taking old animals on the ark? No. The Bible tells us that. It does. Because what does the Bible say they're supposed to do when they come off the ark?
Reproduce.
Exactly. They're supposed to have babies. Now, it's funny. In one VBS, I had a little one yell, "They're supposed to get married first!"
Amen.
I said, that's right. Yes. The animals come off the ark, they get married, and then they have babies. That's exactly right. No officiated all of the weddings. Okay. So, there you go. So, there goes that babies. Okay. So, are you going to be taking reptiles when they're ginormous?
No.
No, because that would mean they're also what?
Old.
Really old. And I'm sorry, but this was not a senior's cruise. Okay? You're going to be taking juveniles. Someone said, well, did you take their eggs? Oh, can we take the eggs?
No.
No, because that would mean what?
More than 2.
More than 2, because you need mama to take care of her. Okay? So you would take juveniles. Juveniles. Okay? So, Edmontosaurus. We talked about Ed last night. Okay? Edmontosaurus here. Okay? Edmontosaurus. Here's his head. There you look at up there. That hind leg. Okay? Remember you measure dinosaurs at the hips. Okay? His hind leg, those can get up to 10 feet tall. Some of the biggest ones ever discovered of Edmontosaurus. Okay? Pretty big. Here's the cool thing. Who's a big dinosaur fan? Okay, right there. Right there. Come right on up here. Come right on up here. There you go. Hold your hand, turn around here, let everybody see it. Hold your hands out flat. Okay? And is that a little heavy? Yeah, okay. You know what this is?
A dinosaur egg.
Oh, I I thought it was a fossilized cheeseburger. Okay. No, you were correct. It is a fossilized egg. That's right. All of this part down here is the rock. This part up here is the actual egg. This is a real dinosaur egg. In fact, it's a hadrosaur egg, and it's believed to be an actual Edmontosaurus egg. Okay? So you're actually holding a real dinosaur. Pretty cool, okay? A lot of our shell has chipped away over the years. But if that baby were to hatch, about how big do you think it'd be? What do you think? Show everybody about how big. Now, if you stretched him out, okay, you stretch him, he's kind of curled up in there. How big? Yeah, probably something like that. Okay, you big dinosaur. There you go. Okay, so as it got bigger, let's say it got to be about your size, do you think that would fit on the ark? Something your size? Could you fit on the ark?
Yeah, I could.
Oh, yeah, you could. That's right. Very good. All right, goodbye. Thank you very much there. Good job. Holding the real dinosaur egg, okay? So, we're talking the average size, based on a lot of studies, the average size of all the dinosaurs as adults, is about the size of an American bison. Buffalo. Okay? Because they're not all gargantuan. All right? The only ones, though, you see in the movies are gargantuans. Okay, so they're not all that big. The average size of all the dinosaurs as juveniles, about the size of a sheep. So we're talking 120 to 160 sheep-sized dinosaurs on the ark. Can they fit on the ark?
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely, no problem. You all put them in one little corner, call it Jurassic Ark, whatever you want to do. It'll be just fine, okay? No problem. Even the biggest ones, the sauropods. Everybody say sauropod. We're going to talk about these guys again tomorrow night. Long neck, long tail dinosaurs, okay? This is one of the biggest to date. This is the Patago Titan. This is in the Chicago Field Museum. You see the little guy there with the khaki shorts? That's me. That's me standing beside him. That thing's huge. Came from an egg the size of a soccer ball. Okay? Size of a soccer ball. They're not always gargantuan. They got to grow to that size. So you're not going to take them on the ark that big. Okay? So there's no problem with dinosaurs on the ark if they're on there. Okay? Now, is this a legitimate ship? Like really could float? Had the right dimensions for everything? Oh yeah, lots of studies on that, including a secular study done in 2014 by the University of Leicester. They had their students, engineering students, do a feasibility study of the ark. Could it really float? And if it could, how many animals could fit on there? One of the students being interviewed about it said, you don't think of the Bible necessarily as a scientifically accurate source of information. What's his worldview? Okay, see it? So I guess we were quite surprised when we discovered it would work. You know how many animals they calculated the ark could carry and still float with no problem? 70,000. Did we need that many? No, maybe only about 6,000 to 8,000. That's it. In fact, you could put all the animals on one floor, put all the food supplies you need for a whole year on the next floor. The whole top floor is empty. What's all that room for?
People.
Pickleball.
What did Peter say Noah was? What was it? Pickleball. Pickleball. What did Peter say Noah was? Preacher. What do you think Noah was doing for that 120 years he may have had before the flood came? Preaching. And how many converts did he have?
His family.
We know just his family at least. 120-year ministry, and you only get your family converted? Boy, if you're ever feeling depressed, just think about how Noah must have felt, you know? Do you think Noah was waving when he got on the ark? Yeah. So this flood comes. A lot of ideas about it, how it came about, what took place during it. We know it was catastrophic. We see global effects, global remains of what took place there. This gentleman here, Dr. John Bumgarner, has a PhD in geophysics, worked at Los Alamos National Laboratory. That's a pretty good gig. He worked on something called the Terra Project, where they were working on plate tectonics and how they move and the abilities to predict them and that kind of stuff for earthquakes and things like that. And while he's doing this, he's using a supercomputer and building programming in it to show how plate tectonics work and how they move. And one of the things he did was he put into it the calculations, what would happen if we split the continents. What if we have a mid-oceanic ridge, as we can observe, and that begins to break the entire lithosphere, the crust cracks, what happens? When we were there at the museum, all in that one room that had the fossils, you had what the Earth looked like 10 million years ago, 300 million years ago, 1 billion years ago, okay, like that. And it shows the continents just slowly moving apart, just real nice and easy, millimeters or inches a year maximum. He wanted to see what really happens if you crack one. I mean, what do you think would happen if you split a continent? Global catastrophe. So based on his work and putting some animations together, you can kind of find these types of things all over the internet based on this. You crack that open and you have all that mantle hit the water, you're going to have massive jet streams shooting water up into the atmosphere. Supersonic, some calculations are. They're going to generate tsunami waves that eventually, over time, are going to keep inundating and inundating and inundating the landmass and eventually overcoming it. And you're going to have evidence of things trying to escape it as well. But it says in chapter 7, verse 11, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth. How many? All. So you got this mantle hitting the water. It's going to cool it, turn it into new crust. It's going to be younger and not as dense as the old crust, and so it's going to also subduct as well. Those types of things are going to cause massive tectonic activities, which will cause massive ripples, tsunamis happening. I mean, you've all observed devastating tsunami activity due to seeing what happens when you have bad earthquakes out in the ocean, okay? And how they cause massive flooding. And you're going to have continents eventually start being fueled by this and really start pushing them away. And the computer models show, again, they're just models, but what they show is runaway subduction of these things. And there's some really neat things all around the earth we see that displays. Now, you put that much water into the atmosphere, what's going to happen?
It's going to rain.
It's going to rain. Maybe for, I don't know, how long do you think? Maybe 40 days, 40 nights.
40 days.
Might take a month for that water to get out of there.
40
Okay.
days.
That's right, exactly. It says the floodgates of heaven open forth. Floodgates, sluice gates. Anybody ever seen floodgate opened up when they got to release some water? That's the type of rain the Bible is describing took place in this event. You can do seismic tomography, and you can see today the red is the newest ocean crust. The green and the blue is the oldest ocean crust. And you can see how it pushed things away along this stuff. And it still kind of fuels it a little bit every now and then. And notice North and South America there. We got blue on the east side, but on the west side, look what happened. That's because when it was split apart over there from Africa and Europe there, it got moving, so it just ran right over some of the new crust coming up for the mantle. This is what some of these models show of what took place, okay? So we start looking at all these things of what they took place, and we have, the Bible says at the end of chapter 7, at the beginning of chapter 8, that this flooding kept coming on for, anybody know how long?
150 days.
150 days. 5 months. This water kept rising and rising and rising and rising until there was no more landmass. Then, the eyewitness account of this, written by Shem, Ham, and Japheth, it says that, chapter 9, chapter 10. Then finally, around number 224, the continents have finally come to their resting places. And what do they see start coming out of the water? Mountains. They say we start seeing these mountains coming up out of the water because these things are crashing into each other. And what's happening? It's shooting this stuff up, okay? If this was moving at millimeters a year, how do you have tall mountain ranges today? Because what's happening today to mountains and hills?
Getting smaller.
They're eroding. Their erosion rates are incredibly fast. I've got several scientific papers done by secular people who say if we believe the Earth is as old as it is and that our continents are as old as we think they are, then they should have eroded away anywhere from 40 to 70 times by now. That's how fast they're eroding away. Subduction zones, where we see some of that new crust go underneath the old crust, go underneath the continents. The one in China that they did a study on and were able to map it out. You see the blue there going down underneath China. Remember I showed you that blue on that previous slide? Okay, that blue where the Pacific plate's going underneath China, underneath the Asian plate there. It's blue there. You see that? And you can still see it outlined there. Now here's the problem. For the evolutionist who believes that took place 6 to 10 million years ago, why hasn't the crust in the middle of the mantle, why is it not the same temperature as everything else? Why is it we can still see a difference in temperature change? Why is it hasn't melted and been absorbed in the rest of the mantle? According to Dr. Tim Clary, who I'm about to show you, incredible geologist, he's like, that should have been absorbed millions of years ago if it's millions of years old, but maybe it's not that old. Maybe let's say 4,300 years ago. Dr. Clary has a PhD in geology from Western Michigan University. He also has a master's in hydrogeology, so he's really good about studying. He worked for Chevron for several years, analyzing core samples and helping them with discovering oil, fossil fuels. Dr. Clary is a research scientist now for the Institute for Creation Research, ICR. They're based out of Dallas, Texas. I am blessed to get to see and visit with him every year and study with him and ask for the latest on his research. I highly, highly recommend you sign up for their bi-monthly publication called Acts and Facts. Every other month they send out Acts and Facts. It is all their latest scientific research. By every one of these guys has a PhD in their secular or in their specific scientific field that they receive from a secular university, okay? And it's completely free. And they'll send it to your house, or you get the electronic version, okay? They just want you to have the information. It's phenomenal, phenomenal ministry. Dr. Clary's research project, he decided, hey, I'm going to start collecting core samples from all over the earth and see what the layers of the that we dig into show me. Because of all of his previous years of doing that, he's like, it seems to me there are these patterns that we see all over the planet that show a progression of sedimentary layers being laid down. And they're always flat, like pancakes, like there was no time for any erosion between them. They all happened one right after the other. As if there was a global cause to this global phenomenon that we see. So we started with 1,800 core samples and started putting them into this computer program. Has a graduate student who's doing this, doing the computer part for him, and he gives them all the data and everything. And they were able to map out these mega sequences. Geology, whether you're secular or not, they see these mega sequences, these patterns of sedimentary layers of rock laid down by water all over the planet, okay? And they said there's 6 of those mega sequences. And he measures them out and shows how we can see these progressions. There's the soft mega sequence, that's at the beginning of it. Then you have the Tippecanoe, and then you have the Kaskaskia, and so on. And what he said is it looks like it's a progression over 150 days of water coming up, and it matches what we would expect to see. And what we find buried in those layers matches what we would expect to see at these different intervals if this is happening during the global flood. One of my favorite parts is when we get to the third mega sequence. The third mega sequence, the Kaskaskia, we're getting near the end of the rising floodwaters. They're getting close to peaking. We're getting to the part where the plates, that stuff's been fueling for so long that the plates are about to really get moving, runaway subduction. And when those plates really get moving, what's the tallest mountain range we got? Himalayas, with the tallest mountain? Mount Everest, which was caused, everybody agrees, by India slamming into Asia and causing that mountain range. And Dr. Baumgartner's supercomputer models and others who have done this as well, some of the estimates are that India was moving at 60 miles an hour when it slammed into Asia. Hence the tallest mountain range on the planet. Buckle your seatbelt, right? Well, right before, notice this is right at near the last part of the mega sequences where the floodwaters are about to completely cover North America. This is just North America. Every one of the little circles there are one of the core samples that he's used to map this stuff out. That last part that's going to be covered, guess what we find a lot of in that area?
Dinosaurs.
Dinosaur fossils. Guess what we usually don't find much of outside of that area?
Dinosaur fossils.
And guess what we see going towards that area?
Footprints.
If you ever come out in Oklahoma and visit, I can take you to see some, or you can go down to Texas and see some. There's all kinds of places out in the West that have preserved dinosaur footprints, trackways. We were going out to the Oklahoma Panhandle, in this area called Black Mesa, where there's a set of dinosaur footprints that have been uncovered there. And we're driving to it. I'm with my colleagues. And, I bet I know what direction they're going. And they're like, yeah, we know. I said, I bet I know. I bet Oklahoma Panhandle. I bet they're going north. Any of them down in Texas and Oklahoma, they're always going north, northwest, as if they're trying to escape something. So we get to Black Mesa. Here they are. There's the footprints. Okay, trackways. It's a tridactyl footprint from some kind of. Originally thought it was a theropod dinosaur. Now they think it might be more of a hadrosaur type dinosaur. But there's my foot beside it. And then I put my compass on it, and it's going 359 degrees north. So would you expect to find dinosaur fossils here in Tennessee?
Nope.
No. Guess what you don't find in Tennessee? Dinosaur fossils. Not very often. However, they're at the McClung Museum. Out in front there, they have an Dinosaurus, just like this guy right here. Okay, I believe it's the Monty specimen that they have on display there. And the reason they have that on display is because back in the 1940s, 5 dinosaur bones showed up. They were finally identified, I think, in 1992 from an Edmontosaurus. 3 vertebrae, 1 piece of amphibia, I believe, and 1 part of a foot. What's that doing in Tennessee? That's what they wanted to know. Because all of your rock layers around here are supposed to be before dinosaurs. You know that geologic column that you see? That they said that these are the ages of time. You know, you start down here with your Precambrian, and then you come to your Cambrian, and go all through the Paleozoic, and then you get the Mesozoic. Mesozoic has your Jurassic, Triassic, and Cretaceous. That's when the dinosaurs are supposed to live. You don't have any of that rock layer here in Tennessee. So you better not have any dinosaurs, because that would totally mess up the whole evolutionary story. Well, they get these 5 dinosaur fossils. And they're like, well, what do we do with these? So, out near Coon Creek area. Does that ring a bell to anybody? Coon Creek area rings a bell with you? Okay. Decatur County, Tennessee. Okay. They called that area right there, they put a little strip there and said that's Cretaceous right there. Because we think that's where these bones came from. And we also found mosasaur, one or two mosasaur fossils, and a whole bunch of other reptiles like sea turtles and stuff like that. Maybe something just got washed out there and it's being buried real quick, because you finally get maximum coverage. These are what the layers that are still there, and then you begin draining off the waters. And there was this little spot. You see the Gulf of Mexico there? And you see the little kind of orange and green there? That measures thickness of that layer. So that's the last mega sequence. That would be the runoff, the wash-off from the flood, and all the sediment would have brought. Dr. Clary, when he was still with Chevron, he said, I think we should go about 200 miles out to the Gulf, and I think we'll find whopper sands. Whopper sands are thick layers of sand that usually will have some kind of crude oil in it that he thinks they could drill and get. They said, well, that kind of costs a lot of money to go that far out and drill. One of the reasons he was thinking that is because in Oklahoma, southern Oklahoma, we have the Arbuckle Mountains. We also have the Ouachitas and the Ozarks, kind of over there, and the Comanche Mountains and everything like that. But the OU students said those mountains used to be 1,000 feet taller than what they are now. 1,000 feet taller. Well, where did it all go? And they said, we don't know. Because none of all what has been eroded, none of that sediment is here. None of it's here. It's like someone just lopped them all off, just cut them all off, and none of that sediment, 1,000 feet of mountain and hills is missing. Dr. Clary said, if that water was running off, maybe from a global flood event, I bet that sediment is about 200 miles out in the Gulf of Mexico. He goes and visits a symposium of some kind, sees some of the Chevron guys there, and they go, hey, Tim, because that's his first name, said, guess what we found about 200 miles out in the Gulf of Mexico? He said, what? We found whopper sands. And we drilled down and found all kinds of oil. He said, you don't say. You see, to get these layers stacked flat, look, every time you see exposed layers, they're always what? Flat. Right? One on top of another. No erosion between them. They had to be laid down pretty rapidly. A French sedimentologist named Guy Berthault did studies with the French Academy of Science in 1986 and 1988, and then with Colorado State University in 1993, and they discovered that at just a change of water flow of 0.5 meter per second, you'll get a new layer of water. You accelerate it 0.5 meter per second, you'll get a new layer of sediment. That's what I meant to say. Another layer of sediment. Because it will funnel out the bigger ones and the smaller ones, or the more dense ones, or the not as dense ones. And you can get lots of layers very quickly. Lay one at a time. And do they have to have dried yet? No. One right after another. And what do we observe out in nature? One little layer after another, perfectly flat, with no erosion in between them. But that's not the only thing we see. We see them look like this sometimes. What happened there?
Yeah.
This? How do you fold a rock? You see that? All those, and then they folded it. Those are the Agios Pablos Beach in Southern Crete. I've got a whole bunch of slides. I showed you these last time you guys were there. This is Mount Head. Yeah, Mount Head near Calgary in Alberta, Canada. The whole mountain is folded. How do you fold a rock? What would happen if we went out there and grabbed a rock and tried to fold it? What would happen? It would break. That's right. Well, you got to heat it up first, right? Soften it up. What happens to sedimentary rock if you heat it up? Changes it to?
Igneous?
No.
Lava.
Metamorphic rock. It would be sedimentary anymore. So there's another geologist, Dr. Andrew Snelling, PhD in geology from the University of Sydney. He's part of a few clubs of geology, as you can see there. Kind of knows a thing or two about rocks. In fact, you might ask him, how do you fold a rock? And he would tell you, you cannot fold a rock once it's solidified if you want it to stay sedimentary. If you fold it and it's sedimentary, it's going to fracture. Or if you heat it up and do that, it's going to turn metamorphic. He wanted to do a little study. He wanted to go to Grand Canyon and look at Carbon Canyon folds near River Mile 65 there in Grand Canyon, where the rock does a 90-degree bend. And all the little layers are all right there together. Nice and flat still. 90-degree bend. And he also wanted to go over to a monument fold at River Mile 116 to take a look at this. Now, before he's done this, he spends 20 years finding and reading every single research paper that's ever been done on the rocks of Grand Canyon to see, has anyone ever tested and checked to see if these layers are still sedimentary or metamorphic. If they're metamorphic, that means they could have been laid down over a long period of time, even though there's no erosion in between the layers, and then were bent at a later time by heat and pressure, maybe over millions of years, whatever. But if they're all still sedimentary, that would mean they all had to be laid down at the same time and folded while still soft and wet, so that way they'd still be sedimentary to this day. And whether you're a Bible believer or not, geologists, they all agree, yeah, that would be the case. So he goes about studying that, finds out no one has tested that. No one has ever done that. So he goes and seeks the permits from the National Park Service and the Grand Canyon National Park to go in and do a rock collection so he can do the stuff. And he presents it. He's done this before. This guy's part of every geologic association on the planet. He's one of the most highly credentialed geologists you could ever find. He knows how to do all the paperwork, all that, blah, 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 blah. He does all that, has his peer-reviewed research proposals, submitted everything, gets a refusal. Says, nope, you can't have it. This is in 2013 and 2014. He's, why can I not do that? They won't give him an answer. So he calls the Alliance Defending Freedom group, who represents Christian people and legal counsel, and they filed a Freedom of Information request with National Park Service. Turns out there were 3 geologists who found out that Dr. Snelling believes the Bible and believes in the global flood 4,300 years ago, and that the Earth's only 6,000 years old. And they said, nope, we're not letting him do it. So they then file a lawsuit that they're going to bring on him. And the attorneys for the government said, well, yeah, this is a clear case of First Amendment violation. He's going to win this lawsuit. So they retracted. He withdrew the lawsuit. He then reapplied for the permits. This has taken 3 years at this point. Okay. And he finally then gets to go and do his research with a group of researchers from Cedar University, geology professor John Whitmore, as well. They collect 53 rock samples. They then bring them back to the labs, do the cleaning, all that kind of stuff, spend 3,000 hours analyzing them under all the right procedures you're supposed to do. Also send them to another laboratory to have them check it out as well, to double check their research, make sure they did the right stuff they did, okay? So these are some of Dr. Snelling's pictures from when they went there. This is that incredible Carbon Canyon fold there. To give you a glimpse as to the scope of these folds, there's Dr. Whitmore. Yeah, I really wanted to see that, but you have to take a long trip down and go to the right spot and everything like that. It's pretty cool. Here they are collecting the rock samples, doing everything, because these guys are professional, highly credentialed geologists. They know exactly how to do this. And so they present their findings, finally, And here's what Dr. Snelling said. Oh, it turns out there are no signs, either macroscopic or microscopic, that the sandstone or its constituent grains have been even slightly metamorphosed. Not even a hint of any metamorphosis, any metamorphic rock, or any fracturing, or anything like that. Which means all those layers in Grand Canyon had to be laid down over millions of years at the same time, and bent while they were still soft. The conclusion in his first journal presentation of this in 21 said, therefore our 4-year research project, the reason it took 4 years because all the legal stuff, confirms that these rock layers were bent while they were still soft after rapid deposition. This is tremendous evidence that the canyon's rock layers were laid down during a massive flood and subsequently bent before any of the layers had hardened. Who likes doing laboratory science? I love it, don't you? Because every time we do observable tests for falsifiable science, what does it always support?
The Bible.
The Bible, every time. Here's something else he saw in those rocks. What's that? See those little tubes going up through there?
Fossils.
That is the trackways, the little hollow tubes of trilobites trying to climb through those layers. Trilobites, little underwater roly-poly things, okay? That crawl along the ocean floor. They're crawling up through all those layers, which I thought those layers were laid down over millions of years, right? Boy, those guys are slow crawlers, aren't they?
Persistent.
Wow, persistent is an understatement. That's right. Okay? Fossils. What do we find in these rock layers? Fossils. And what are fossils? Rock. Ooh, you're smart. How'd you know that? Fossils are rocks, aren't they? Come here. I need a couple volunteers. Come on up. Come here. Come here. Anybody? I need some more. Like the whole row. I can take the whole row. Come on. Right up here. Wiggle. Run out of time. Oh my, we're almost out of time already. Whew, we're just getting started. Okay, there we go. Yeah. Oh, there they all come. Okay, here we go. Okay. Here. You hold that one. Both hands, please. Both hands. There you go. You hold that one. Oh my goodness. Here you go. You want to hold that one? There you go. Good. Okay, everybody show. Don't drop that. That's pretty good. Okay, everybody show these. Oh, here we go. I have a couple of these bones. Alrighty. There you go. It's heavy. There you hold that one. And this one's real pretty. Oh, actually, that one's pretty cool too. There you go. Okay. You got one? There you go. Good. Okay, everybody show them your fossils. Now, are they hard or soft?
Hard.
Hard. Are they heavy or light?
Heavy.
Heavy. It's heavy. That's right. Because they're solid what? Rock. Okay, we've got some trilobites, we've got some ammonite impressions, some trace fossils, and some molds, okay, of the inside of the ammonite shell. We've got some dinosaur bone. This is the bottom of the femur of an Edmontosaurus, okay? It's really cool. This is one of his vertebrae from his back, a caudal vertebrae. And these two pieces are different types of coprolite. Don't you like coprolite? You know what coprolite is? Everybody say coprolite. Coprolite. It's the scientific term for dino poo-poo. Did you do that? There you go. Okay, you guys go back. Hand me your fossils as you head back. There you go. Good job. All right. So there's solid rock. How does that happen? How do you get these things? Now, were these things always solid rock? No. Hopefully they were a lot softer. Right? At one time? Okay. So how did they turn into solid rock? Well, you got to have the right conditions in order to make fossils, okay? Here's how we make fossils, okay? I should have had you all stay up here. That's okay. Stand up. You guys stand up, okay? Here's how you make a fossil, okay? Go like this and say mud. Mud. Okay, go like this and say water. Okay, go like this and say quickly. Okay, to make a fossil, you have to have something that was alive or is from something that was alive, and had to be buried with lots of mud that was brought by lots of, and that has to happen very quickly, because otherwise, what would happen to that animal?
Decays.
It decays. It goes. Whoever sees some roadkill out there, does it ever turn into a fossil? No, it doesn't. You guys can sit back down, okay? No, it doesn't. It has to be buried in order for it to be preserved, to be protected from all the elements that would decay or scavenge it. And then the water is mineral rich, which means a lot of sediment's been stirred up and a lot of minerals have been exposed through a lot of geologic activity being brought in. And that mineral comes in and slowly starts to replace the bone, the original material, with that mineral and turns it into rock. It's called permineralization. Okay? And that had to happen. That burial had to happen pretty quickly. Where do we find fossils?
In the ground.
In the ground. Yes, I know. Every time somebody says in the ground. Where on planet Earth do we find fossils?
High places.
Everywhere. Everywhere. You can go to databases like the paleobiology database, and you will see that we've discovered fossils everywhere. I can zoom in on any of these places, and you can see all the places. These are just ones that have been cataloged, officially recognized. Yeah. So that means at some point, all these different places on the earth had to be covered with lots of mud, brought by lots of water, very quickly. So this geologic column that, as we said here in Tennessee, you're missing a whole middle section of it. You don't ever find the whole thing intact anywhere on the planet. What do we find in there? Fossils. Most of the time when you think fossils, you think what? Dinosaur bones. But 95% of the fossil record is a bunch of marine stuff. Shells, clams, mollusks, bivalves. 95% of it. Over how much of the earth? All of it. Isn't that interesting? Even Mount Everest.
Yep.
30 or 20-something thousand feet up at the Hillary Step, they find seashells up there. Was the flood that high?
Oh yeah.
Shake your head. No. No. It wasn't that high.
No.
Because Mount Everest wasn't there when the flood started. Okay? It came up during the flood, day number 224, the Bible tells us. Okay? And brought all that stuff up there with us. And to this day, everybody's got to explain, how did you get seashells at the top of Mount Everest? Exactly. Only 0.0025% of the time do you find a fossil of a vertebrate, an animal with a backbone, and find more than one bone. The vast majority is marine stuff over the entire planet. And here's the thing about fossils. Every description I saw and heard today in museums, everyone said how a fossil is formed is that something living died and then floated down to the bottom and somehow didn't get scavenged in water. You know how fast stuff goes away in water? My goodness. Somehow survived and eventually mud covered it, or it got washed out, didn't get scavenged, and eventually got covered in mud, and then it turned into a fossil. In the evolutionary scheme of things, everything dies and then it gets buried. Tell me, in the fossils I'm showing you now, does it look like they died and then got buried? Or they got buried and that killed them? You got a conga line here of shrimp-like arthropods. Here's one of trilobites doing the same thing. You've got ichthyosaurs in Holzbaden, Württemberg, Germany. Over 100 of them buried together there. They're all giving birth. We carry one of these in our other trailer, the one there in the middle. There's one in the birth canal, one still in mama, and one out by the tail. And she got buried with brought by lots of quickly. 100 of them. That's not the only place. They found them in Nevada. They found them in Peru. They found them in China, all giving birth. What are the odds that every time an ichthyosaur mama died and just happened to get buried in at least 4 different continents, it was giving birth? What was going on here?
Lunch.
They were having lunch. And what happened?
Buried.
Got buried. Here's one of my favorite ones. This was a plate of a school of fish found in the Fukuyu Prefectural Dinosaur Museum in Katsuyama, Japan. And Dr. Plotnick of the University of Chicago was one who's like, caught his eye. He's like, oh my goodness, look at that. It's an entire school of fish. Now, in his evolutionary worldview, what had to happen first?
They all died.
They all got sick and died at the exact same time. And read his own description of it. Look at it. Look at it. They all have they're still in their swimming position. Here's his description of it. He said, I can't picture a three-dimensional school of fish sinking to the bottom and maintaining all their relative positions. That makes no sense to me. So he had to believe they swam through some kind of poison or something that killed all at the exact same time, and they all happened to just float down and maintain their exact swimming positions in order to be buried like that. Unless what buried them is what killed them, then that's exactly what we'd expect to find. What we got here? A horse.
A fish.
Found in Wyoming. What's around the horse?
Fish.
Fish. No, this is not a seahorse. Do horses spend their time hanging out? No. What had to have happened here? This is found in Wyoming. You have crazy stuff like this. What's this?
Can't tell.
It is a squid that you will get to see when you go to ICR.
All right.
Okay, in December, right? Remember you guys are coming back. When we go down to Dallas, Texas, to ICR, this is a squid that was given to them. This is the actual fossil. How many bones do squid have?
None.
What happens almost instantaneously after they die?
Decompose. Scavenge.
We have the whole thing. There have actually been preserved ink sacs found. You realize how fast they have to be buried. With lots of mud and water buried. When you find dinosaur bones, sometimes you'll find the skeleton intact, and when you do, it can be quite interesting. What do you notice about every one of these skeletons of the dinosaurs?
Okay.
Their necks are bent backwards. This is so common, paleontologists call this the death pose. Here's my favorite one. This is Black Beauty. It's a T-Rex in the Royal Tyrrell Museum in Drumheller, Alberta, Canada. What does it look like T-Rex was trying to do there? Get his head above water. Get her head above water. What's her feet even look like she's trying to do?
Swim.
How good of a swimmer do you think T-Rex was?
Not good enough.
How could she get herself in that kind of situation? The obvious answer is that these creatures were all drowning. They're trying to get their heads above water, they're trying to swim, and then they got buried with lots of, brought by the
Water.
buried, and then crushed their head on down. These are moments in time. Fossils are moments frozen in time. And the tragic thing is they are moments of judgment frozen in time. People say, well, but we've done carbon dating on these things to show that they're not that they're millions of years old. Who's ever heard that?
Yeah.
Okay. If anyone ever says carbon dating proves these fossils and these rock layers are millions of years old, you automatically should know they don't really know what they're talking about. Because carbon dating is one of several radiometric type tests, and carbon dating only works on stuff maximum 50,000 years old. Okay? What's the max? According to the secular scientists, the evolutionary scientists, how old will it work on? Something that's how old? Maximum 50,000 years. Everybody say 50,000. 50,000 years, okay? But here's the deal about all those tests. None of those radiometric tests, potassium argon, rubidium strontium, lead, none of those actually measure an age. All those tests do is take one rock sample and see how many of one atom, one isotope is in it, and how many of another one is in there. That's all it does. It's then up to the scientists with their worldview to decide how long did it take for that to happen. Well, it's much more technical than that. We have observed decay rates. We know how long it takes for that stuff to decay and get in there. Okay, but do you know how much you started with? How much is leaked out? How much is leaked in? Do we know any of that? No, we don't. Those are all assumptions. You get to put those numbers in when you calculate it. And not to mention, decay rates supposed to be constant. I have multiple scientific papers on every one of these. Peer review in secular journals, none of these by creationists, by people who read the Bible, that show that decay rates are not constant. You should check out the Stanford-Purdue study that really freaked them out. Because as they say in the article, but we were raised since we were little to understand that decay rates are constant. But we're observing in real time, they're not. And we went back in the literature 50 years to see what they said the decay rate was then. It's not the same now. It hasn't been the same ever. What should that do to every one of those radiometric dates they put out there? Yeah, not legitimate. Well, but we know it takes millions of years to get crude oil. 2013, the U.S. Department of Energy's Pacific Northwest National Laboratory in Richland, Washington. You think those are big Bible-believing creationists? No. Their experiments showed you can get algae turned into crude oil under heat and pressure within minutes. What do we see in those flood models? What was happening with the flood? You have all this material, marine material, being buried, lots of heat and pressure. In fact, some are saying it still happens today. That's why we keep finding it everywhere. It doesn't take millions of years. Oh, but coal! All this coal we find. We know it takes millions of years of heat and pressure to turn that plant material into coal. The Argonne National Laboratory in Lamont, Illinois, heated plant material for 2 to 8 months. Absence of oxygen, so as if it was buried with lots of, and very quickly in 1984, they had coal in 1 to 4 months. That wasn't the only one. They've reproduced this. Here's another study in 1996, published in Organic Chemistry. None of these are Bible things. Great. This is West Virginia University and the U.S. Bureau of Mines heated plant material at a certain temperature, under certain pressure, and the wet sediments, and had coal in 75 days. And by the way, what do you always notice about those coal seams? Level. Perfectly flat. As if vegetation, mass amounts of vegetation were just ripped off the surface during a global catastrophe and then buried. And all that heat and pressure. Actually, you want to do a quick test real quick? I know I'm about done. You want to do a quick test on some of this stuff? Yeah. What if we had some PhD scientists who were trained in these fields and they did some, coal is supposed to be like 50, 60 million years old, 100-some million years, or 300 million years, depending on what layer you find it in. Carbon dating is supposed to only work on what? Up to 50,000 years. So if we were to put coal in a carbon test, should we find any carbon-14 in it?
No.
No. Carbon-14 is something that's happening in the atmosphere, okay? And it's breathed in by plants, and then animals eat plants, or we eat animals that have eaten plants. So all of us get carbon-14 in us all the time. But when we die, we stop taking that in, so it starts to decay and go away and leaves nitrogen-12, okay? So after 50,000 years, should you find any carbon-14 in anything? No. Never. Never. These guys tested coal samples from all over the place. Guess what has been found in every single coal sample, and several times after this study was done? Guess what's been found in every single coal sample that's ever been carbon tested? Carbon-14, and lots of it. Meaning by their own test, they have to be less than what? 50,000 years old. Diamonds are supposed to be coal that has been under heat and pressure for 1 billion years. Should there be any carbon-14 in diamonds? Guess what we found in every diamond sample that's been carbon-14 tested? Carbon-14 and plenty of it. Dr. Brian Thomas has a PhD in paleobiochemistry. There's a conversation starter right there. got from Liverpool, brilliant mind. I've got to work with him a lot, incredible. His PhD thesis he did at Liverpool was about original biomaterial in fossils, and he was having these things carbon tested, and every time he got the test back from the laboratories, he was double checking the math, and he was coming up with a different number. So he called the laboratories and said, why are my numbers different? They said, well, did you put in the subtraction factor? He's like, the what? He said, we automatically subtract out carbon-14 every time we do a test. He's like, why is that? Because if you were going to set your machines to make sure they're right, you should get a sample, your base sample here, that is carbon neutral, right? So you start with something that has no carbon-14 in it? Yeah.
No available resources.
Guess what every laboratory told him they have never found?
Anything without.
A carbon neutral sample of anything. So, for part of his PhD thesis, they started a literature review, searching every database they could get their hands on the entire planet. And this was peer-reviewed by his professors before he could get his PhD, and said, we have never on planet Earth found anything that was carbon neutral. And he said, every time they said, well, it's because of contamination. Shouldn't that be the exception, not the unanimous rule? I about fell out of my chair. Actually, I was driving when Matt Miles read that to me, and I about drove off the interstate because I said, "Did what?" Everybody screamed in the van. It was terrifying. There's never been anything found that didn't have carbon, which means everything on planet Earth that can be carbon tested has to be what?
Less than 50,000 years old.
50,000 years old. And then it got worse for the evolutionists. So these creatures, these dinosaurs, supposed to go extinct 65. It's now 66 million years ago. You hear that all the time. Obviously, the Bible's wrong when it says our history started 6,000 years ago. But then there was a scientific discovery that was published in 2005. Remember that guy who was wanting you to believe birds are the descendants of dinosaurs in Jurassic Park movies? Jack Horner. Remember his name? Montana State University. Check this out.
Horner's practice of breaking dinosaur bones apart and sending the insides to Mary Schweitzer has landed the two of them at the center of one of the biggest controversies paleontology has seen in years. It started back in 2000 with a series of coincidences. A member of Jack's team, Bob Harmon, wandered away from a dig site one day to eat lunch and noticed a small piece of bone sticking out of the side of a 50-foot cliff.
I could tell pretty much what it was from where I was sitting. It was a T-Rex metatarsal.
How was it sticking out? You mean it was a side, here's a cliff, it was like a little jutting out?
Yep, exactly.
He got a folding chair, and he stacked it on these rocks right there.
Look at that.
And you can see that this is on the sheer side hill of the cliff.
This is not possible.
No,
Is he attached to anything?
No, he's not. That's Bob.
Jack named the T-Rex B-Rex in Bob's honor and made the decision to dig it out.
But this was under 50 feet of rock. I mean, this was in a terrible place. There was no road to it. There was no access to it. And so for the next 3 summers, we sent out climbing crews, people that could rappel down cliffs with jackhammers. I mean, it was a horrendous undertaking.
The site was so remote that bones had to be lifted out by helicopter. But the giant cast containing B-Rex's thigh bones was too heavy. The chopper couldn't get it off the ground. So after all that excavating, Jack gave the order to cut one of B-Rex's femurs in 2.
Now that was heartbreaking.
No, well, not really. I mean, get a chance to see inside.
He shipped the bone fragments that fell out to Mary Schweitzer.
So she calls you up and she
Calls
says,
up and says, we have medullary bone.
oh, now this had to be thrilling.
Yes, very exciting. And that wasn't all.
What happened next happened by mistake. Mary put some fragments of the bone in acid to dissolve away the outermost layer of mineral. But the acid worked too fast and all the mineral dissolved away. Being a fossil, there should have been nothing left. But there was. And it was elastic, like living tissue.
This is the piece.
No.
She showed us video she took under the microscope.
That's really what happened?
Yes.
That's the dinosaur
Yeah.
bone?
Without mineral now. That's what was left.
It looked like the soft tissue she would have expected to find if it had been modern bone. This was impossible. This bone was 68 million years old.
So you see this and you think, what? You
I didn't want to tell anybody.
That you'd be ridiculed,
Yes.
right?
And so I said to my technician, okay, do it again. I don't believe it.
And yet, in sample after sample, they were there. Things that looked suspiciously like flexible, transparent blood vessels. She finally mustered the courage to tell Jack.
She said she dissolved the bone away and there were blood vessels, and you know, I was like shocked. I mean,
How could that be?
how could that be? That's right.
The things Mary was finding inside dinosaur bones,
Look at that.
blood vessels, and even what seemed to be intact cells, pose a radical challenge to the existing rules of science.
No, they don't.
That organic material can't possibly survive even 1,000,000 years, let alone 68 million.
That's correct.
Mary, Jack, and their team published their B-Rex findings in a series of papers in the journal Science and were promptly attacked. Critics said their samples might have been
Oh, there's the
contaminated,
magic word.
or that the supposed
Contamination.
blood vessels were actually something called biofilm, a type of slime. But as Mary showed us, she's been able to replicate her findings. These are pieces of an even older dinosaur, a well-preserved 80-million-year-old duckbill. When she dissolved it away in acid,
Let's put this under the scope here.
well, look,
Is that a blood
This
vessel?
is a blood vessel. You see the branches right there? And look at all of them. And it's so consistent over and over and over again. We do this bone and it comes out and I get excited every time. I can't help it. I mean, 80 million years old.
Mary published her new results last year, and while some of her critics have been swayed, the controversy still rages, and the stakes are high. If blood vessels can survive 80 million years, what about DNA?
They weren't supposed to find that. Because it does not last that long. Not even close. And they were ridiculed and ridiculed by the scientific community. And they kept doing study after study. And then they had other people do it. And finally, Harvard successfully sequenced the dinosaur protein from the Brachylophosaurus and from the T-Rex and said, yeah, it's true, there it is. There's the B-Rex, there's the femur, there's the stuff they found in it. Collagen, hemoglobin, blood vessels, even red blood cells were found in it. And it just keeps showing up over and over and over again. How could that stuff, and that's the problem, how does this stuff last for millions and millions of years when all science says it cannot? They keep publishing it over and over and over again. Dr. Thomas, who I just mentioned, has a PhD in paleobiochemistry. There's so much of it, they're just breaking these things open all the time. Now, actually, they drill and take core samples and they'll just break them open. And they find it so much, you can get a PhD course in that, degree in it. That's how much this stuff is in all these dinosaur fossils and many other things. So he and another scientist, Joel Tay, I got to work with him as well, they keep an ongoing database of peer-reviewed published articles talking about original biomaterial found in fossils. And they have up to 122 already that have been published on this stuff. And then it got worse! For the if you thought that was bad. In 2020, in April, National Science Review publishes, we found something that absolutely shatters the possibility of these things being millions of years old. They didn't say it like that, but they kind of said it like that. Because for the first time ever, what did they actually find? DNA. Of a Hipparchosaurus. They put this little chemical in there, and if it lights up, like pink or blue or whatever, that indicates there's DNA present. Do you realize how fast DNA breaks down? But wait a minute, what if they just weren't millions of years old? Why is that the one variable we can't change in our theorizing about these creatures? Because then our whole worldview has to change, doesn't it? Dr. Jonathan Sarfati, who has a PhD in chemistry, he was studying all this, and he said, if you had the right conditions of, say, in a cryogenically frozen in a laboratory at -5 degrees Celsius, you might get it to last 6.8 million years. But these creatures are supposed to be 68 million years, 10 times longer than that, or older. And how many of them have we found cryogenically frozen? Might it last 4,300 years? It's so cool, some of the things they found, that for the first time ever, they found the intestines still preserved on this ankylosaur. There's actually a notosaur, pretty cool. And preserved soft tissues. And they checked out the osteoderms on there and took the samples from it, and they, for the first time, know the color of a dinosaur. Because stuff that's been preserved that shouldn't be there, if it's millions and millions of years old. You want to see what color the dinosaur was? Are you ready? Here it is. Here's the color of the dinosaur. It was rusty. That's what it was. I mean, it was okay. Yeah, that's cool. It was some kind of rusty red color. Hey, what's that test we can do that only works if it's 50,000 years old or less?
Carbon
Carbon 14. What do you think we should do to some dinosaur fossils? Who wants to do a carbon 14 test on a dinosaur fossil? Oh, yeah. Why don't we get Jack Horner to do it? Wouldn't you like to get Jack Horner to do it? Bob Inyard with a radio show in Colorado raised $10,000 to send to Jack, asking him to do a carbon 14 test on him. He later raised $18,000. I think last number before he passed away was $24,000 he raised to send to Jack Horner, do the test, keep all the rest of the money for your museum, do whatever you want with it. Never heard from Jack, so he called his office live on his radio program, got his receptionist, said, yeah, he's in, he'll talk to you. And he explained, I'm on live on the radio. Jack said, yes, okay, I'll talk to you. And he said, and so he asked him if he got the letter. He said, yes, I did. And he said, what about doing the test? You can find the whole 8-minute conversation on YouTube. These are the only parts that are suitable for ears. Okay? And here was his response when asked about doing the test.
Let me tell you where I'm coming from here.
Sure.
All right? Obviously, your group is a group of creationists.
Yes.
And the spin they can get off of it,
right,
doing it, is not going to help us.
Yeah. So even though it's just a scientific test, they're not asking for voodoo.
It's not actually a scientific test. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Carbon 14 dating something with soft tissue.
And then Jack starts to get a little frustrated after that. Why wouldn't you do the test?
Because we derail our whole platform.
But why not do the test and prove these crazy creationists wrong once for all and shut them up and tell them they don't know what they're talking about? Either he knows, or he's afraid, or he's already done the test. Well, guess what? We went ahead and had scientists do the tests. 2012, the Paleochronology group, headed by Hugh Miller, presented, how many samples there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, a bunch. At a symposium, I think in Singapore, and they just reported it. Didn't talk about why or anything about Byron, just presented it. And then a month later, their presentation was completely removed from all the rest of the presentations in both the print format and in the video format. It wasn't allowed to be seen anymore after that. So all we did was just publish results from these tests, and just was wondering, getting some input from scientists. No, we didn't want to hear that. Dr. Thomas published in 2015. They got 16 samples, sent them to 4 of the best laboratories, carbon testing laboratories in the U.S. Guess what came back with each one of them? Carbon 14, lots of them. And notice as you go down the supposed geologic column, the amount doesn't really fluctuate a whole lot. As if it was pretty much all around the same time all those layers were laid down and those creatures were buried. And then in his PhD thesis, he had several more that were tested. All came back with lots of carbon 14 in them. We've got red blood cells of T-Rexes. We've got carbon 14 in their bones. Woo! Is anybody excited about this? Man! Because every time we do a observable, testable, repeatable, falsifiable science, what does it always confirm?
The Bible.
And Jesus said, if you can believe the things you can see with your eyes. So we had a judgment. Just a reminder. The rain lasted how long? 40 days and 40 nights. The flooding continued for how long? A total of 150 days. The mountains came up around day number 224, and from beginning of the flooding event till it was dry, not when they got off, but when it was dry, 314 days. This was not just a 40-day rainstorm. This was a year of judgment. As my colleague calls it when he does this presentation, he calls this a year you should never forget. Because what was the promise after that?
Never going to happen again.
God made a covenant, didn't he?
He did.
And he said in that covenant he would never do what again? Cause a flood like that. If it was a local, just a certain geographical flood, as some tried to claim, have we had local geographical floods since then? Yeah, what would that mean God's done regarding his promise? But have we ever had a global judgment with a flood? No. Has God kept his promise?
Yes.
Does God always keep his promises?
Yes.
Every time you see the rainbow, it's a reminder he keeps his promises. And if you are in Christ, what's the promise? You get to be with him. You get to be saved from judgment. You get to be with him forever and ever. And so the prophet Isaiah said in chapter 54, "For this is like the days of Noah to me, when I swore that the waters of Noah would not flood the earth again." Don't you love how the Bible always is so consistent? "So I have sworn that I will not be angry with you, nor will I rebuke you, for the mountains may be removed and the hills may shake, but my loving kindness will not be removed from you, and my covenant of peace will not be shaken, says the Lord, who has compassion on you." Heavenly Father, we are here tonight, and we want to pause and praise you for your endless compassion, your everlasting love, and how we can be saved from sin, from death, from judgment, because there's the one door we can enter into, Jesus Christ, our Creator and Savior. May we rejoice every time there's a new victory, when one life is saved, when there's new evidence that is brought forth that shows your word is true, when we see your word impact lives, and when one gets to go home and be with you for all eternity. And may we be heartbroken at the lives that are still lost, that aren't in the ark of salvation. And may it compel us to just want to go and share with them. Not bring them all kinds of evidence and stuff like that, but just love them and be there for them. And then open up the door for them to ask questions, and we can answer them and show them thy word is truth. And through it, the gospel is the power of salvation. That's our prayer tonight, that's our victory tonight, and that's our commitment tonight. We made in Jesus' name. And those who go share that love of Christ with the world said. Amen.